This happened when I was about 11 or 12. I've lived in the big city my entire life, and the closest I've seen to the woods was a few trees in the park. I've never been away from my mom for more than a day, so when she registered me for a week-long sleepaway camp, I was dead set against it. The thought of outhouses, bugs, and leeches in the water was not my idea of a good time. I have not changed my mind on that. But like most mothers, they have the last say. Before I knew it, I was standing in line at some church parking lot. I was boarding a charter school bus, looking at parents waving goodbye to their kids. Some kids lost their cool and started to cry. Some mothers started to cry. Also, I saw my mom and she was all smiles. It occurred to me that she would also have a mini vacation from me as well. The morning of the bus ride to camp, I felt like I was going to throw up. After an hour on the freeway, there was nothing but bumps on the road and kids being unusually quiet. It felt like we were being sent to a prison camp. I sat next to a kid who was a first-time camper like me. I tried to hide my nerves, but she was quick to point out that there would be hundreds of kids there, and that we could gang up on counselors when it was time to escape. That made me laugh. That's when I met Terry. She was also 11 years old and had never been to camp before. We struck up a conversation and realized we had a lot in common. We both loved animals, had a pet dog, and enjoyed playing video games. As we chatted, the 4-hour bus ride didn't seem so long. We laughed and joked around, and before we knew it, we had arrived at camp. I was still scared, but having Terry by my side made me feel a little more at ease. She said that, since we were from the city, there wasn't anything in the woods that could beat a city kid. Damn right. I overheard the driver and the other adult in the front tell the kids closest to them about the campsite. He said something about wolves and bears, but that was just something to excite the kids. The other adult told the driver to knock off the campfire stories for now. Instead, the driver talked about the site. The site was some repurposed barracks from the old days. Like 60 years old or so, the barracks from World War II were repurposed into a campsite for kids, and it was both an interesting and unique sight. The buildings themselves are made of concrete, and they have a very distinctive appearance. The exterior walls are plain, with few windows and doors, giving them a somewhat ominous appearance. But on the inside, they have been renovated and fitted with modern amenities to make them comfortable and welcoming. Walking into one of the barracks, I saw that there was a lot of room with bunk beds lining the walls. The beds are neatly made, with colorful blankets and pillows, giving the space a cheerful and inviting atmosphere. There are lockers next to each bed for campers to store their belongings, and a small table and chair for each occupant. Terry and I got the beds next to each other before anyone had a chance to protest. The first few days of camp were great. I went to the bathroom like a normal person. We ate in the canteen and generally goofed off. By the middle of our stay, we were told we were going camping for real, like real outdoor camping. We would be hiking for about an hour into the deep woods and pitching tents. Then we would be foraging for berries, mushrooms, and making several campfires. When we got out to the area, there was a clearing in the field, but everything else was nothing but dense woods and high grass around the edges. The first night we set up some tents, and around 7 o'clock, saw that the counselors were instructing the braver kids how to start bonfires. There were about 4 fires that were on the rim of the clearing and one large fire in the center. That was where all the kids sat and heard what I think was their first ghost story. To be honest, the stories were kind of lame, but good-natured. When we settled in for the night, we were put together, 6 kids to a tent. Because of the long hike, most of the kids were asleep before long. The noises in the woods were new to me and kept me up most of the night. I felt a poke from Terry. She asked if I was awake. When I whispered that I was, she said she had to pee, and she couldn't hold it. So we slipped out of the tent and started to look for a spot outside of the area. As we walked a little ways out, I said I was afraid of what was out there, and she looked back at me and smiled. She then pulled something from her side pocket and held it up for me to see in the dim light. It was a long screwdriver she brought from home. I had to put my hand over my mouth when I saw it. I would have laughed longer until we heard something in front of us. As we moved deeper into the forest, the rustling of leaves beneath our feet gave away our position, but I don't think whatever was making the noise cared that we were close. We stopped moving and I heard what I could only believe was wet, slurping sounds. Something crunched and then made a slurping and chewing sound, like a kid that didn't know how to eat with their mouth closed. I pulled on Terry's jacket and said we needed to head back. Even at this distance, it was hard to see the light of a campfire. Terry just raised the screwdriver again and said that she still had to pee. I told her, just do it next to a tree and let's get back. She walked ahead, pulling me with her. As we got closer to a large tree, the sound stopped and Terry walked more quickly. She rounded a tree and I waited for her. She did her business, and when she returned, she suggested that I go now too. I agreed, and when I was done, we started to walk back the way I thought we came. We only got a short ways when we saw a large round object on the ground. The trees blocked what little moonlight was able to get in, but we saw on the ground 2 black, glossy eyes and what looked like tree branches. As I grabbed Terry's hand, I saw that they weren't branches, but antlers. On either side of what I could only assume was a deer were 2 small animals chewing and gnawing on the carcass. Behind the deer, we saw a pair of large eyes on the head that looked like it was a mix of wolf, person, and monster. The eyes of the creature were mesmerizing and awe-inspiring. They were a deep, piercing yellow or gold color, and they seemed to glow in the darkness, reflecting any available light. The pupils are large and round, allowing it to clearly see us. All I saw was a tall, buffed creature. Then it stood up. At its full height, I thought this giant monster was going to swallow us whole. I can't remember if it growled at us first, or if we screamed. Both of us were loud, but then I only heard footsteps coming. Before I knew it, Terry and I were running. As we were running, I heard other steps running and could only assume that it was the 2 smaller animals. We had what I thought was a good head start. I put my head down and pumped my legs like I was trying to catch my 7 a.m. bus for school. I could see what was at the edge of the camp and the dim light of the bonfire in the middle of the camp. I heard a yell and turned my head. The creature had snagged Harry's jacket and was pulling her back and whipping her back and forth. I think the creature was debating if it was going to go for me or just cut its loss and leave with Terry. I saw that Terry had dropped a screwdriver next to me. I took Terry's screwdriver and tried to jam it deep in the creature's thick leg. It felt like using a butter knife to cut steel. At first, the creature didn't register it, but after a second, it reared back its head and howled, swiping at me with an open hand. The claws must have been sharp because I felt my windbreaker rip and a painful stinging near my arm and chest. Terry's body thudded on the ground like a heavy sack of rocks. Terry started wailing louder, and I saw the creature cocked an arm back like a boxer and leaned back. It looked like it was going to put me down for good. I just stood there like a deer in headlights. My mom's face flashed in my mind, and I was praying that I would see her again. The creature stopped when it heard footsteps and yelling headed towards us. I looked back and saw lanterns and heavy-duty flashlights waving around, like a knife slicing the darkness. The creature took a step back and then another. It growled, then it, and the 2 smaller pups ran into the darkness of the woods. I crawled over to Terry and screamed for help. After about a minute, the counselors found us and whisked us back to the tents. We slept for what seemed like a day. When we were able to get back to the main, modern campsite, a nurse was there to give us a checkup, and our moms were called. When the head counselor spoke to us, he had 2 other people with him. He told us about how dangerous it was to go out in the woods by ourselves, and that we were lucky. Bear attacks weren't normal. Terry and I looked at the old balding man and his associates. I thought he was being funny, but he spoke with a straight face. That wasn't no bear. I yelled at him. You know that wasn't no bear. He gave me a long, pitiful look. Your parents are about an hour away. The camp shuttle will take you both home. Get well soon. When he left, Terry and I exchanged looks and watched the partially closed door. I thought they were listening in to see what we would say. That wasn't no goddamn bear, Terry said. He knows that story won't fly when our moms get here. City kids are tougher than that. I gave Terry the longest, hardest stare of my life and nodded my head. Damn right.